the button.
Found it. Okay. Well, good evening, everybody. I'm Chris Bignell, the interim CEO at VVM, and I want to welcome you all to our second virtual VVM community night. Wanted to give a special shout out to some individuals who stuck around with us last month. I know Eric and John in particular were there, as was Stephen Brand. So they gave us some feedback, and it was much appreciated, and that actually led us to make a decision about tonight that came out of that discussion. And what we decided was to do something a little different than what we have done previously. So instead of having a bunch of startups give a pitch, and then at least in the live world, we would have had breakout sessions, if you will. We decided this time to have a keynote speaker. And that this evening's keynote speaker will be our esteemed chairman of the board of VVM, Mr. Scott Foster. So he will be giving us an update on how COVID has impacted entrepreneurs and obviously business in general. And then we also decided to reach into the bag of tricks and call some of our VVM alumni and have them provide us with an update as to where they're at, how they've managed through COVID as well. So we have Barrett Mully from Aclarity, we have Pat Candianis, and I think I saw Colleen show up as well from Quatromoney, and Chris Lucas from Ompractice, although I haven't seen him just yet. But those are, that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to make sure that people had a slightly different engagement this evening than what we've had previously, and mix it up a little bit, and hopefully it goes off without a hitch. So with that, I will pass it over to Hope.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, so I just wanted to welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for our community night tonight and taking time out of your busy schedules to meet with us here on Zoom and to get some updates on some of our VVM alumni. And I'm really excited to hear from everybody and hear how their businesses have been, as well as to hear from Scott Foster. I'm also just wanted to mention that I'm going to put into the chat some upcoming opportunities through ecosystem partners. The WIT Mentor Match cohort is recruiting right now, both entrepreneurs and mentors. So I'll be putting the link, the registration link for that in the chat, as well as the Forge Manufacturing Showcase is coming up. And I'm going to put the registration link for that in the chat as well. As also, I'm going to be putting in a survey if you're interested in volunteering and getting involved with VVM, just to kind of gauge your interest and availability, as well as your expertise, because we can't run VVM without committed volunteers. And so we really appreciate everybody who's been part of VVM in the past, and really look forward to continuing to serve entrepreneurs in the future as well. So take a look in the chat, not right this second, but I will be putting those links in the chat. And also, I think with that, I'm going to kick it over to Scott Foster.
All right, so I think I'm going to refer to myself heretofore as the esteemed Scott Foster, because it just sounds good. So Chris, thank you for that. I've been looking for an appropriate introductory title. Chris asked me to fill some time, be the keynote speaker for this evening's presentation. And I think the last time I got asked to speak at anything involving VVM was a good 3 years ago. So you can look for me again in sometime in 2023, 2024 time range, depending on how this goes. So I think he was asking me to comment a little bit because I have somewhat of a different perspective on what's happening with businesses in COVID, given the breadth of clients that we have here, the different people I interact with, the advisors that I'm interacting with, the calls I'm on with different business advisors and business owners and accountants, that I kind of get maybe a different vibe of what's out there, maybe a broader vibe of what's out there. So he's asking me to kind of comment on that, and also how it's affecting entrepreneurs. So how it's affecting entrepreneurs first? Boy, it sucks. It's a lousy time to start a business because it's hard to find, all the tricks that we had before of interacting with other people and how you raise money and building a network. Really, really, really challenging. So if you didn't already have a network, it's just about impossible to build one right now. I mean, that's just, and everybody's facing that. All the entrepreneurs are facing it. All the startups are facing it. That's not to say it's not happening. Certainly we are seeing, I'm seeing new businesses still come in the door here. We had another company come in the door today that's making edible consumer products. I won't go beyond that in terms of the description. That's not cannabis, it's other products. But they've launched inside the COVID time, and what they're finding is people want locally made products. So they're taking advantage of the drive for not relying on stuff that's being imported out of the region or imported from outside the region in, but instead is made, right here and locally. So that's an interesting trend. I'd say overall, the obvious is, listen, businesses, if you're in a sector that relies on people getting together or on travel, you are getting slaughtered. There's just no way around it. The bars are closing. The airlines, are shutting down the number of employees they have. They're furloughing massive amounts. Some of you know how near and dear Disney World is to me. They're firing employees down there, letting them off. The Orlando economy is in tatters right now. But other sectors are doing really well and are kind of making up for it, if not exceeding what the sectors that are getting slaughtered are leaving behind. If you run a package store right now, you're having a great year. If you're in the grocery store business, you're having a great year. There's a lot they're hiring. Amazon taking off. Anything that's online, if you are positioned, and hopefully we'll hear from Chris Lucas later tonight. I don't want to steal what he's going to tell you, but if you had a company that was already positioned to do something online and had a little bit of traction, you now have a lot of traction. So it is interesting that even though most people are seeing doom and gloom and all these bad things are happening, like in any recession, there are winners and there are losers. VVM itself was born out of the last recession. It was a time when there were more entrepreneurs in the street because fewer people were employed, unemployment was high, so people were ready to take the launch into entrepreneurship. I would say we haven't seen that yet. I haven't seen a lot more startup. I'm seeing a little startup activity. I'm not seeing a ton of startup activity yet. I think you are going to see it in the new year. I think and there seems to be, there's a lot of uncertainty around the election right now and what direction things are going in. I think once that's done, you're going to see people say, okay, now I have a better sense of what's going to happen. I'm now going to launch my idea. I'm now going to invest in a new company. One thing I just note, and I just have to say this at every time I have a Zoom meeting with folks, as you look around at the Zoom meeting right now, you can see that most of us, I think the few exceptions, are working from home. That is unequivocally a luxury of either the unemployed or the white collar workers. It is not a luxury of people making minimum wage. It is not a luxury of people who work as a nurse or as a doctor or in the manufacturing sector. So when people talk about, oh, everybody's working from home, everybody's working remote, that's actually not even close to true. It's actually a very small sector of the population. It just happens to be all the people we hang out with are doing it. But my manufacturing clients, they've never shut down. They had people coming to the shop floor every single day. And as a shout out to one of our VVM startups, Machine Metrics, I don't know if any of you follow them on LinkedIn, they post, probably not daily, but close to every day or a couple times a week, they'll post their stats that show, because they track, for those who don't know, Machine Metrics installs a device that, amongst other things, tracks the uptime and productivity of your CNC machine in a machine shops. And they've got these installed at companies all across the nation at this point. So they report aggregate data of uptime on the machines. And 2018 was crazy high. 2019 was a little below 2018. 2020 was starting out kind of in between the two. Then COVID hit, it just plummets. But it comes back. And by July 4th, it was back ahead of 2019. And it's been consistently trending between 18 and 19 since then. It's not blowing the doors off of 2019, but it's ahead of 2019. Now, what's interesting to me on that data is that's an aggregate data of all these machine shops, across the nation. When you drill into specific shops, and this is what some of our clients are on, you have to talk to them about what are they actually making. So I've got a client who makes plastics that are in consumables. So they make the plastic thing and somebody else puts something in it, a food product, and it's sold. They're going gangbusters because as the economy shifts around and more people are buying stuff at grocery stores, more people need bottles of food on the grocery store shelves, so you need more bottles, so his orders are way up. Other clients have focused in the aerospace or the oil and gas industry where they're doing parts that go into a machine that's used in those industries. They are having a horrible time because those contracts are getting canceled or aren't getting put back into place. If, however, they've got a defense element, that's going through the roof at the moment. So there's really, all these things are obvious if you have to, hopefully as you're hearing them, you go, oh yeah, that makes a ton of sense. The one thing I would say to all of you is if you're ever thinking of hiring a competent, qualified salesperson, now is your time. Salespeople are being laid off in droves. And I've seen it both from individuals that I know that are salespeople that have been doing, they've been someplace for 10, 20 years and suddenly they've been laid off. And companies that I represent are laying off parts of their sales force. Why? They don't need to travel. While a salesperson before could sell to, let's say 20 accounts and they would have to visit all of them, they now don't need to visit them. So you take away the travel time, you take away the going out to drinks time, and suddenly checking in with the customer, you can check in with 50 customers instead of 20 a week, or whatever your unit is. You can check in with more customers. Therefore, you need fewer salespeople, in-house salespeople. And companies are appropriately, assessing where can we cut costs to get through the COVID crisis. That's one of the areas. So on the flip side, if you need to hire a salesperson, now would be a good time. And the last thing I'd say, I'm running a little bit over, is we're now into the phase of the PPP loan process. How you paid attention to that. PPP loans were out there, Paycheck Protection Program, big program suddenly launched. The SBA processed 30 years of loans in 6 weeks. There were some mistakes made, as you might imagine, doing something that rapidly. But so all this money went out, and now all the money is needing to be forgiven because the program was set up so that if you spent the money on the right things as a business, that the SBA will forgive that. We are now in the throes of all these PPP loan applications forgiveness applications being submitted. Nothing's happened yet coming out of that, but if you're paying attention to the news, I'd look for the next wave to come about of people being audited and people not getting forgiveness and what a disaster that's going to be. But if you have a PPP loan or if you know anybody else who does, I strongly encourage you to file for that forgiveness as soon as possible. I know other accountants, I was on a phone call today and they said, well, we're hearing from our accountants who are saying to wait on filing or to not file. And I say, well, that may be, but that's because they want you to finish your tax return this year without knowing what the PPP loan status is. And then you'll have to amend it once you get that figured out. So they're just driving up business. I say it slightly facetiously, but not entirely. So if you know somebody who's got a PPP loan, please get your forgiveness application in. Please get that process started. And if you have any problems, or if you have particularly good experience or bad experience, if you just drop me a note, because I'm trying to get a sense of how that process is going. So I want to thank Hope and Chris for keeping the VVM flame alive through this time. Certainly, and I mentioned businesses that rely on getting people together or getting slaughtered. That's kind of VVM stock and trade. Getting people together, giving them some food and a beer and watching the magic happen. It's a little different time right now. So I'm really appreciative of the efforts that they're deploying. I'm appreciative of all you folks being here, and I'm especially appreciative of our 3 speakers tonight who are willing to tell us what their companies are up to and embrace the VVM spirit about sharing things in a friendly, supportive environment. So with that, I'll hand it back to Hope.
Thank you very much, Scott. That was great. It was great to hear from you. Okay, so the way that we're going to do this is we have 3 speakers, 3 alumni businesses coming. First, we're going to have, I think we have a couple minutes less, so I think we've given them up to 10 minutes to pitch or present, and then about 5 minutes for Q&A, just so that we can hear from the community. You can ask your questions. You can feel free to type those questions into the chat or raise your hand if you like, and I'll be able to monitor those. Our first presenter is going to be Quatromoney.
Hi, everyone. Patrick here, and Colleen's with us on the grid here somewhere too. I just want to say, Scott, that what I'm paying myself is the equivalent of minimum wage or thereabouts. So I may have a blue-white collar on, but I certainly feel, although I'm not forced to be in a shared environment, I'm definitely feeling the pinch myself. But that's just the land of startups, which often work well below minimum wage at certain times.
Patrick, if you're making minimum wage, you're doing a great job as a startup.
Well, thanks. It's good to see some familiar faces, even Barrett's, in the mix, which is good. So the long and short of Quatromoney these days, and I have been at VVM working throughout the pandemic, not as regularly as I normally had been, but it's there, and it's nice and clean. And if you come by, I think you'll find that Hope is taking great care of the place. So don't fear VVM. It's a pretty good place to hang out still. But yeah, we've been really, really busy. Despite the pandemic at the start was interesting for us because we did some surveys of as you know, I think Quatromoney helps families figure out how to pay for all 4 years of college up front. It's a self-driven, very easy to use college financing planner, and we've had the product out in the market for a little over a year and a couple months now. When we first were in April time, we had done the first survey of college students and families about, are you going to change your college plans? And it was well received. We of course did a press release, shared it, and our traffic went from 6,000 people a month to about 50,000 people a month in 30 days. That was on boosted posts and things like that, but it got picked up, and it was extremely viable and valuable, I think, to most families. And we were ahead of the game on it, which was cool. But as we went into the summer, we actually were selected into Mass Challenge, which was really cool, as well as FinTech Accelerator, INV FinTech, which is operated by Fiserv, one of the big banking core companies. And so we kind of, we didn't know exactly what to expect. We knew a little bit, but suffice it to say that, the FinTech Accelerator has been great for just contacts and expanding our sort of biz dev outreach. And it's actually still ongoing. It's still going through the fall here. And Mass Challenge, and honestly, at the start of Mass Challenge, it was a extreme amount of work, and we were busy, and we were maybe even a little bit annoyed that we had all these things that we had to do because there's lots of requirements with it. But we sort of set ourselves, we took off our pride a little bit and said, okay, what are we really looking at as a business? One thing that we were coming to face was the fact that the B2C plan that we had was not going to fly without significant resources. And we were making it work, but it was working in dribs and drabs or in smaller numbers. And so we made a call to use Mass Challenge to pivot to a B2B2C model and to take our functionality that we have at Quatromoney and turn it into functionality that could live at any bank, credit union, employer, or otherwise interested website, and provide the experience that we work really hard on within their world. And so, and not only within their world, but if they were a financial institution, that we could actually feature their products instead of the sort of house products that we had as solutions. And that was a pretty big move for us. I mean, it was a unsure move at first, but what we realized is, if we're going to go out and raise more money, if we're going to be a business that lasts and endures, we need to scale. And scaling on the D2C side, even though I'd done that with the previous business, was really, really expensive. And so we kind of, we put our pride to the side. I'm an old dog, and it was like, can I really go learn a new trick? And Colleen's not an old dog, but she also has been in the business for a while, doing lots of startups and whatnot. But we took advantage of that, and we got connected to some great folks. We really changed our go-to-market strategy. We changed our messaging. We changed our targeting. We honestly just sort of reinvented ourselves and said, hey, we're a solutions provider, and you're a financial institution or employer that has these folks that are looking for help on this really challenging topic of paying for college. So we've got this cool platform, which is actually maybe even more like a widget. It's a tool that can sit on your website, keep the customer in your environment, and make you look like the paying for college hero instead of us looking like the paying for college hero. And honestly, that move has been just eye-opening and amazing. And we're flourishing right now in terms of activity. We really only took the message out maybe 3 weeks ago for the first time, 4 weeks ago. And honestly, we've had intense interest from some banks and credit unions that you would know here in the Pioneer Valley, to large national credit unions, Navy Federal Credit Union, the largest credit union in the country, big groups of independent community bankers, credit unions and banks all over the country, Chase. It's an interesting time to all of a sudden, be in our shoes, because we're still just two people. But we figured out the messaging, we figured out the product side, and now it's really biz dev and trying to scale. And so we're excited. And in terms of a startup kind of getting a new lease on life and COVID, what's really been apparent is that the pandemic has forced folks to really think about the value of college and the expenditure on college. And folks, that survey we did show that 26% of folks were rethinking their choice for this coming year. And now you have virtual versus non-virtual, all sorts of varying things out there that are affecting people's decisions. And that's what Quatromoney does. We help people figure that out. Plus, we help them figure out the financing side, which has always been a challenge, but is even more so now. So, happy to say that, we also did get a little more support from Mass Mutual this summer, which was great, and some of our angels. So, we have some more cash in the bank, and, we're just trying to get our first checks in the door. We've got our first contracts out. We've got proposals out. We've got lots of biz dev traction. And so from our side, it's good. It's great. We hope the momentum continues. Honestly, you mentioned salespeople. Yeah, if we can find salespeople who work as independent contractors on a rev share, we've got plenty. We'd love to do that. So maybe we'll spend some more time thinking about that. But as far as a community ask, hey, if you've got connections to banks and at a C level or senior level, we'd love to connect, because the message really does resonate. I think most folks understand that they have this void. They may have a product or two that can help, but they don't know how to connect families to that product, and that's really what Quatromoney does. So again, good to see everybody, and yeah, if you have any questions or thoughts, we'd love to hear them, and always appreciate the support and the interaction. So thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Barrett, you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I was just going to say, my question to you is, how has COVID impacted, how people are investing in their children's future? Do you see any trend you know, I just had a newborn. I have a 6-year-old. I'm looking at investments. I'm looking at, you know, college funds. How have you seen any change in how people are looking at that? Or are they more worried about the present day, like political kind of, you know, standpoint of what's going on? Or are they more, or is it pretty solid and they're looking for, you know, 18 years out? I'm just curious to do, if you see any trends with, you know, our current, you know.
I think the tsunami of pandemic, right? If you think of it that way, is hitting from grade 12 downward, right? So grade 12, you know, the class that just started this fall, this year's grade 12 and next year's, you know, and grade 11, I think you're seeing that impact in a real visceral way, because it's, you know, the kid is still on the couch, but they're a freshman at UVM, or, you know, like how does this work? And I know from my own friends who have college age children that they're, you know, it's frustrating, you know, the empty nesters are now not empty nesters, and, you know, or, you know, so there's a lot of that issue. I think the student perception is, you know, is this really what I signed up for? Is this really what I had hoped for out of college? And I think that given that there's not yet a vaccine and there's, you know, there's obviously been measures taken, that I think people have made a lot of sacrifices, and a lot of people chose, and Colleen maybe can chime in, I can't remember the number, but I at least 10 to, I want to say 10 to 12% of folks this year took a gap year and just said, I'm not going. And so it's, you know, that's a pretty significant number. So there's a lot of colleges and universities that are hurting, much like travel businesses, you know, they're highly dependent. There's a number of highly dependent, tuition dependent institutions. They are hurting, you know, because they've had to step up their spend to protect the students who are there, but there's fewer of them. You know, some schools, folks that we know well, you know, they expected 50 people not to show up, 150 people didn't show up, you know, so that, but to go down to the level of the newborn, I don't know that we've seen that yet. I would hazard a guess that that's probably tied a little bit more to the political environment, to the hopefulness of change, right?
Yeah.
But it, you know, as anybody that's has a child in, you know, in grade school or anything, I mean, it's, you know, this normal is not a really fun normal right now.
Yeah. Maybe I just make one comment for the early planners, as we call them, people who are, you know, trying to do something now and may have from newborns to elementary. You know, a survey that just came out this week, 67% of American families, to the tune of 167 million people, are financially stressed. They are so with the savings, they're and the attributes that they're talking about are, how are they, like, do they have emergency funds? Are they accessing their emergency funds? Are they anticipating the need to do that? So I bring that up in the context of this, because I think some people are just putting a pause on saving for college for their early, you know, kids, because either they're trying to have easy access to funds in case something happens, or because they, in fact, just to handle life right now may need them, those funds.
Yeah. And just to, like, I'm sorry if anyone had a question. I just want to, I'm curious of, like, you know, with, you know, not to talk political, but, you know, with the Supreme Court Justice nominee who's going through with the, you know, possibly getting the ACA, you know, repealed, that's going to be a big financial burden for, you know, for parents. And I'm wondering if, you know, if you guys have thought about, like, what that looks like for your company, because, you know, healthcare is an immediate cost, right? As opposed to, you know, a 14, 16 year kind of outlay for what a college looks like. And I really worry about companies who, like you guys, who rely on people having the ability and having the, you know, the financial structure to save. I'm just wondering how you guys have thought of that, and, like, what your thought process is going through this kind of where we are.
Yeah, I think that the idea, you know, we're flexible, right? So we're going to build in some COVID centric stuff into the site tuition without room and board, a discount on tuition that, some schools have come out with that concept. I think, there's already been this move of higher ed, meaning traditional four-year education is not as necessary as it once was to be the ticket to the future. So when all the conferences that were ed tech are ed and career or workforce, education. So there's already been this sort of, negativity applied to the need of a four-year education and the cost, right? Which is why we have this big 1.7 trillion issue. So I think what you're going to see from this, also relevant to what Scott said, right? Like, what industries thrive when there's this sort of challenge out in the market, right? Like, if you're in the travel and tourism business, which I was in a former life, I mean, and I had a startup and it would have been dead, that business would have been cold, in the ground. But I do think that what our business is about is really about, much like Betterment and others have tried to focus on retirement, like allowing regular people to do things that maybe only used to be accessible to wealthy people. That's the way we look at paying for college, that, hey, even though you don't have great resources or you are economically challenged and you haven't saved, college is still a pathway for you. In fact, college has always probably been priced the most relevant to your income out of any, higher opportunity, right? So income-based pricing is part of what we do now. I think that families there will be lots of folks who will appeal financial aid in the future. There'll be lots of folks who want to know more based on their situation, what might be possible. So I actually think for our business, it's a good thing. It's unfortunate because it just means that there's that more anxiety, right? We start our pitches now that the number one financial concern of US parents, 73% of the population, paying for college. Imagine what a pandemic does. Imagine what loss of job does. Like, this thing's only going to get kind of uglier before it gets better. But, you want to say time heals all wounds optimistically about the environment we're in, all different ways. But I'm hopeful that folks come out of this realizing that, the sort of flip decision to send your kid or allow your kid to go off to a college that maybe you couldn't afford, well, maybe that's not the right move anymore. Maybe you really need to think more about it. So we're hopeful. Probably chewed up all our time on that.
No. Thank you so much for sharing. It was really great to hear from you.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
I put the information, kind of all of the different handles and contact information in the chat. So feel free to check that out, and I'll put it back in again. And next, we're going to have Ompractice.
Oh, good. Unmuted. Hi. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Scott and Chris and everybody for inviting us to share an update, because this year has been 10 years. So I will try to keep it reasonably understandable. But we have gone from lowest of lows to highest of highs, and with a lot more interesting things to come. But very, very simply, Ompractice, if you don't know, is a company. We're based in Springfield. And we are virtual yoga and wellness for B2B, so for businesses and sort of beyond. I'll kind of get into that a little bit. But we've been doing this since 2018. So pre-COVID, all virtual fitness at home. I personally knew that the market existed, both being a teacher and a student. And what became clear to us as we were building it was we were not building an at-home fitness thing. We were building a vehicle for access for people for health and wellness, particularly people who were already overlooked, or things like yoga, meditation, or other sort of evidence-based wellness. It was inaccessible, whether it's because they lived in the geography prevented it. Economically, yoga, those kinds of things tend to be priced high. So a certain, it requires disposable income or disposable time, which is even sometimes harder to find. Inclusivity wise, it's a barrier where people just don't necessarily want to go to a studio, or they don't feel comfortable there for a number of reasons. And then even availability, just the time to do it is hard. So we believing just getting rid of all of those barriers. The internet exists, neither should those barriers. And so we have really taken the position of OmPractice exists to provide access. And it's, anybody who already practices yoga is welcome. And also there's more people who don't, and we can be a way for people to dip their toe in and find a practice that can change their lives. And we're actually seeing it happen and play out in real time. I won't go any further back than January, although you have a whole other dramatic story before there. But I would say in January of this year, we actually, we were just finishing up what we thought was some fundraising, and then it fell through. And so we found ourselves in a very uncomfortable moment where we actually had to make some pretty hard choices, both just on a personnel level. Are we going to pay ourselves? So minimum wage sounds amazing when it's over zero. And, we already had a small team, but it really banded together. We ended up having some really powerful conversations with sort of our teaching team, because we had 50 teachers all over the world, and we're saying, look, this is where we're at, and this is how we plan to get out of it. Will you partner with us? And they all said yes. And that's the reason I'm still here right now. And we actually sat down with, one of our investors from the Alchemy Fund, and just wrote it all out. How do we get profitable? Forget the idea of like large volume makes us attractive as an acquisition or anything like that. How do we get this thing profitable in 6 months? And we figured out a way to do it, and we did it. And what was cool was that was about the time where MassMutual was sort of re-engaging. So Patrick mentioned their conversations, and I was sitting at this desk around this time of day when I got a call out of the blue, as if I had been looking up and being like, what can we, please send something? And my phone rang. But I mean, that obviously didn't happen right away, and we had a lot of things to show. But because of our sort of our own full-on inspection and overhaul of our own business, we were able to be ready for that. So we're one of these few companies that is like operationally suited to serve this moment. So kind of when people had to be at home and they're feeling a little pent up, and like, so they either were used to moving and they couldn't, or they were feeling something like, I got to move, or I need to be able to like de-stress. We were available, and we were actually not going to get overwhelmed. So we saw, obviously we saw our usage like 100x just off the charts. So that was something we kind of thought was going to happen. We had been seeing our growth 10% every month, which, to me was like, that's good, that's showing progress, but maybe to others it's like, that's not fast enough. And then obviously it just kind of like everything caught up. And at this time we had also been we got into the Mass Challenge Health Tech cohort for 2020. And out of that, we had a partnership with AARP, who actually over the summer actually became an investor of ours, because they really liked what we were doing. They saw what we were doing for seniors in this entire sort of senior living market that we're exploring now. And that's been really exciting for us. So we're seeing like, oh, there's other applications to OmPractice and what we can do for populations that are currently underserved, frankly. And it's not because they don't deserve it. It's just because somebody decided they don't have enough disposable income. So we call BS on that, and we go for those folks. And that's really where the B2B model comes in for us, is that we partner with companies to help them realize population health objectives within their employee base, their members, or their customers. So if you have a lot of sort of like, if you have a stressful workplace, like it's just a high stress position or place to work, we actually help combat that. And we give people the freedom to choose their own classes, to do this. Like, it's not you just, overly monitoring your employees. You give them some freedom to choose something that works for them, which they found really valuable. One thing that COVID accelerated was our partnership with the Department of Veterans Affairs. We were working with one pilot site as of last September, and we started working with them a little bit more in the spring, and then that turned into 8 sites. Then that turned into an entire region of the VA and all of its employees. Then that turned into 2 regions. And as of right now, we are accessible to over 700,000 veterans on the Eastern Seaboard, with 2 more contracts that are out there right now. So where we went from, wow, are we going to make it to the summer? We have enough runway to make it for the next like 24 months, courtesy of all of you, kind of. that B2G market. But what's really powerful is that the access approach is actually resonating and showing results. So We hear from the VA constantly from the staff, so the physicians, the groundskeeper, like that these people, like, we love this. This is the best benefit we've ever gotten from the VA. Please, like, thank you, thank you, thank you. And they pass those on to us because they don't write them to us. They just write to the VA. And also the veterans community is using it a lot too. And so that is starting to pick up, and we're really excited. So I have a goal of 1 million veterans have access to this by Veterans Day. We're close, not there yet. And the VA is just one example of a federal agency that we can support. So we're very focused on the public sector right now, and health systems, because insurers and all of those folks are folks we had worked with in the past. And I think we're at a better place where we can demonstrate our ability to create outcomes versus say like, oh, we want the optics of providing yoga. Like, no, do you want optics or outcomes? Because we're in the outcomes business, and that seems to resonate right now. So that is where we are. About 5 minutes before I was late to this because I was presenting at a UMass venture finance class, and they were kind of like grilling me on like a mock investment thing. And I realized how far I've come just even being in that class, because that's crazy. And I also just got word that we made an offer for a head of engineering for somebody who's wildly out of our league. And she said yes. So I just found that out. Yeah, that's the win. So I'm really excited about that. We are, as Pat said, we're hiring sales folks right now. So we've got interviews like all over the place. So if you know somebody who's really great, who deserves a shot, because we are looking for people who we're not looking for pedigree. We're looking for people who can connect to other people powerfully. So if you have people in mind, please send them my way, chris@ompractice.com. Or if you're your company, I don't care what size you are. I mean, we're working with massive federal agencies, and I want to be working with as many like folks in Western Mass as possible. Like, it's bizarre that we're actually like, it's upside down, and I want to fix that. So if you are a company in Western Mass and you want to have yoga, meditation, Tai Chi, I don't like whatever you want for your employees, we probably already offer it. But if you want that for your people, tell me, we will make it work for your budget. Don't worry about that. The important part is they get it, not how much it costs. So we'll figure it out.
Thank you so much for sharing. That was really great. We probably have time for our questions. Anybody have a question? Feel free to raise your hand, virtual or regular, or just unmute yourself. I also typed in the email, so you can feel free to follow up via email, and I put the links in the chat as well.
So I have a question, Chris.
Go ahead.
The process that you went through, kind of casting aside some of the direction you're going to just focus on becoming profitable and bringing in revenue.
Yeah.
What were some of the specifics that you did to do that?
I sat down with people smarter than me, first of all, because I stopped pretending like I knew all the answers. Part of it was backing into what are our expenses and where do we cut, right? So how lean can we get without sacrificing quality for our current customers? And then are we targeting the right things? So part of that was, we're going to take some big swings on some businesses, and can we ramp up and expand existing relationships? Because I think I had always been too afraid to ask for more. I think like some of our insurers we were working with, I was worried if I asked for more, they'd say no. And I don't know why, because they all were like, yeah, okay, well, oh, so you want to do custom like curated stuff for us? Great. What does it cost? Like, it's just always a reminder that like, my imagination, like I'm one of the best fiction writers in America half the time. Like, there's just like, it's totally like, I just created a reality that didn't exist, but I was really convinced about it, and I was so scared to ask. And then I realized, oh, I just was being silly. And I'm glad I can say that. Well, Chris Big, yeah, I usually don't tell that to like most of my investors, because they're like, are you kidding? But I think there is that aspect in terms of, we got very clear about, okay, who are we going to target? How can we expand existing relationships? And also, maybe I don't get paid. And that was really hard, and it was very stressful. But as you know, my wife and I agreed, like, there is an end date on this too. So it's not like we got to keep it a lot. Like, at some point, like, okay, this isn't going to work. Mercifully, we got back, like, I got back to a paycheck before COVID. So it wasn't like I relied on the pandemic to hit before I could like pay myself again. Like, we started making money again, which is great. But I mean, the biggest issue of that whole thing was I started spending money we didn't have. because I thought I was told, here comes an investment. No problem. Sorry, it's taking an extra week. No, I'm asking, should I change my budget? No, it's coming. It's coming. Don't worry about it. And so like a dummy, I spent money we didn't have. And then when the terms and everything changed, I was, I had to do a big apology round to everybody because that was just me. And I had to own it. Yeah, sorry. That didn't totally answer your question, John. But yeah.
That's the mind of a startup, man. You suffer and you survive, and then you remember, and sometimes you just need to forget a little bit and then just keep plowing forward.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, I just want to say that Chris is helping me out. Like he's talking to employers. Our solution is an employer solution possibly as well. And we just reconnected today. And so, the community concept does work. VVM, whether you're, virtual or sitting across from each other or whatnot, it's definitely been helpful for us. So we're psyched to see Chris make it, and hopefully we'll be there soon too.
Yeah, you never know what a year will bring, I guess.
I would say, do you have a special class in personality training for Barrett that we could contract for?
I don't know. I think we could all be a little bit more Barrett in our own lives. So
Yeah.
before we go,
Yeah. That's great.
Speaking of Barrett, we will pass it on to Aclarity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, Chris and Patrick, I applaud what you guys have done so far. I think it's awesome to hear how much you guys have grown. I'm really proud of you guys. I'm really, I think it's fantastic, especially in 2020, which has really kind of sucked. I think it's great to hear a success story out of this whole thing. So I'm really proud of both of you guys, and I hope that you guys can continue to do well. So for those who don't know Aclarity, we founded our company back in 2017. We're a water purification technology, and we develop and sell proprietary modular electrochemical water treatment systems for the industrial wastewater market. That might sound really complicated, but it's really not. We basically clean water, and we do it better than anybody else. We use electricity and our proprietary technology to run water kind of through our devices, which produce chemicals that will basically attack or destroy certain contaminants in the water. Chris and I were in a VVM, it was a 2018 accelerator together. We became good friends, and we've really accelerated from there. I was working in the basement of VVM, thanks to VVM for allowing me to use the basement with no windows, to really build our first device. And that was a device that, based on the engineering that I created and how I was putting things together, we actually were selling those devices. From that standpoint in 2018, where I was allowed to move out from the basement, we raised $650,000 of local investment funding, which I'm happy to talk to anybody about. The local kind of ecosystem of investors that are out there, and Chris is also well versed in the local kind of ecosystem of who's out there for local investment. So we raised that money. And we also received a federal grant, which I'm also happy to talk to anyone who's out there looking at the federal grant money. It's a great way to raise money for your company. We have something called an SBIR, which is a Small Business Innovation Research Grant, which allows you to do research on your own startup and to basically provide you funding to make your company successful. The whole kind of thesis behind what the federal government wants you to do is they want you to be a successful company. So they'll fund you based on certain technologies that you have, or any idea that you have that they think is reasonable to fund to basically bring in money to the economy. So from a fundraising standpoint, there's not only VCs out there, there's not only angel funding, but there's this other thing called non-dilutive funding, which I'm sure VVM has talked about, which I'm happy to talk about because we have a lot of experience with it. That literally gives you and pays you money and gives your company money to produce a product or to move your technology forward at no equity kind of loss to you and your company. So it's a really big advantage. So, we raised local funding, but we also raised, $250,000 from the federal government. From there, we're able to move out of the basement, which was great. It had great HVAC, so it was totally fine. To a local lab, and which we built and actually made into a functional water purification lab, which is state of the art, which is kind of unheard of, and kind of where we are in a startup. We're able to use that funding to make our own lab, so we weren't relying on other labs, or we use UMass a lot. That we didn't have to rely on UMass to actually do a lot of the analysis, and now we have our own home, and it's really cool to have a place where we can do a lot of that analysis. And that was a lot of the federal funding and a lot of the kind of startup funding that we use. So we built that lab in Hadley. That's currently how we're working out of. We've moved from 1 or 2 employees to 5 employees now, which is really exciting. From VVM, we've pivoted from kind of cleaning. We thought we would clean residential water, which is a huge problem now. Everyone knows of Flint, Michigan, but we've kind of moved off that and said, let's go after the markets that we know we can attack. And that's the industrial side. So that's the wastewater side. That's the water going out. And we've done really well. Everyone's heard of PFAS. That's one of the things. That's a forever chemical that is really hard, really recalcitrant to actually break down. And our electrochemical technology can actually destroy that. So a lot of states, we hope the EPA is going to go to this, where they're going to put a gold standard in place, where they're going to look at destructive technologies, and we're really the only destructive technology out there who can actually do this. So it gives us leverage in those markets to actually go after, literally having a foothold that they can only come to us, which causes a bit of a monopoly, but it's great for us, and I think that's a really good thing. So we moved from residential to the industrial side. We moved from making our system in the basement, which is me literally cranking, Rage Against the Machine, and building these things with like chop saws, to contract manufacturing. So we have a contract manufacturer in California who's literally making these things in batch modes now, which takes the burden off of me making these and having it more kind of, Six Sigma, very structured, very, all the tolerances are very tight, and they're taking control of all the export controls. So we're shipping all over the world now, which is fantastic. We're also taking all the logistics, for all our raw material in as well, and importing raw material from China, which is a very challenging thing to do in this particular, political market that we actually work in. So I think that's something that we've really, we've done really well. So we're selling our devices now, and what we're doing is we're really selling a single device. We sell it to a customer. They basically test it on their own effluent water, and they say, great, this worked awesome. And then we basically say, okay, you need 100 of these things, and we sell them, $1 million system. So that's currently where we are. We filed more patents since we've been at VVM, which creates that kind of more structured moat around the company to make sure that we're protected, which is exciting. And we're really in the process right now of moving towards more development, more R&D to create more skewed items for our portfolio, to be able to serve either larger markets or different markets. And the beauty about electrochemistry, it's not just like, a carbon filter where you can put it in your refrigerator. It is a product that can be used from various markets at various different flows and various different contaminants. So, we're a disruptive technology, and that's really what our kind of R&D is based on, is, making sure that we're smarter, better, faster, cheaper than the other technologies that are out there. And that's what we're doing with a very small team. And I think that's really attributed to a lot of the stuff that VVM has taught us, to be scrappy, right? As Chris said, I might not get paid this week or this month or this year, but we know that this is going to be successful because we have the tools, and we know kind of what we need to do to make this successful. So we feel very fortunate to be kind of going after and being kind of this technology disruptor in the market. you know, and our goal by, you know, Q2 of next year is $1 million in revenue. And I think that's a very conservative goal just based on where we're going. And, you know, based on, you know, what Scott's saying, COVID's been tough. COVID's been really hard, especially for, you know, like I think Chris and I are on two different, you know, spectrums of running a business, you know, where it's online. We're a very physical company. We need to be in the lab. We need to be designing stuff. We need to be, you know, interfacing with, you know, with our employees. And that's been a real struggle. And I think that's really kind of, it's been an eye opener for me as a COO of the company, and being the kind of the operator or the operations manager, is to really making sure my people are safe and they feel comfortable in their work environment. And that's been a real struggle. And there's more added cost onto, you know, the masks, the sanitation, to making sure that, you know, we you know, every 2 weeks now we have a full deep cleaning of the company. It's really pivoted our mindset to ensure that we're taking care of each other. Not that we didn't think of that before, but it's just a very different kind of ecosystem that we find ourselves in. And I think that's been really good for our morale, because we all know that we're there to take care of each other, and that we're all there for a common goal. And I think it's been a real challenge. And I hope that, you know, I feel comfortable that we are overcoming that. But for a physical company, as you know, a manufacturing company, it's really, really tough. But I feel very fortunate from what we've done in the past year with our investment, with our, you know, our government funding, that, you know, I think we're on the other side of the positivity here, that we've done really, really well, just based on, you know, how we manage things, and, you know, how we have managed COVID. And, you know, water's always going to be an issue, and that's, you know, that's a benefit to us too. So I feel good about where we're going, and I feel like we're going to be successful in the future.
Thank you so much, Barrett, for sharing. That was really great to hear from you all. Eric has a quick question. I know we're at time, so I want to respect people's time, but Eric has a quick question. What sort of flow rates are you getting from your devices these days?
So really, that's a great question. You know, our single SKU item right now, we have a certification for disinfection, which is one end of the spectrum, which is about 15 gallons a minute. For the PFAS stuff, which I said, which is very kind of a recalcitrant, requires more power, but it also requires less flow, because their water needs to stay in there for the chemicals to actually react. I'm designing right now a larger system so we can basically service larger flows. That's part of the SBIR, is for us to design these larger reactors that can put in, as we all hear based on our Google feeds, right, or whatever, that, you know, there's all these water problems. So we're really trying to service all those markets based on the designs that we're doing. So anywhere between, you know, 1 gallon a minute to 1 million gallons a day is kind of our target market.
Very cool. And then Zoleka also has a question, if you'd like to unmute.
Sorry, I'll be quick. But hi, my name is Zoleka. I'm from Farganics, and we create in-home gardening systems. And I was also geeking out a bit because we created our own biofiltration unit that we use in our systems, and we're currently doing our first SBIR pitch.
Awesome.
And was wondering, since like there's so many kind of similarities between like obviously filtering water and like doing the SBIR and like building your own tech, I was just wondering how you managed like the IP side of it with government funding, because we don't have a lot of resources. Like our lab is my studio apartment. There's tools that we don't like have a lot of money for lawyers and that. I don't know what stage you were doing your patents, or like how did you navigate that?
That's a good question. Yeah. So we were actually, we were the university. So the university basically paid for the upfront costs of what the patents are, right? So, and then we basically signed a licensing agreement with Scott, is very well of, you know, aware of what that, you know, term sheet looks like. But for you, it's not really expensive to file a provisional patent to basically stake your claim, or stake your flag, or you know, in the sand, to say, we think we have something novel here. It's only a couple $1,000s. And it's, if the IP itself, as anyone who has IP knows, that that's really kind of the backbone of what technology companies need to be able to go fundraise. So I recommend talking to, and I can certainly talk to you, you know, about this later, is to hold on. Sorry. It's 1 second, buddy. Sorry, it's my 6-year-old. Is to go talk to, you know, someone who has been involved with providing a provisional patent and talking to a lawyer, because it's not that expensive. And then that gives you ammunition and leverage when you start fundraising. If you think you have a, you know, an opportunity there, that's what the value is. That's an asset for your company to go fundraise on. So I'm certainly happy to take this offline and certainly talk more about it.
I'll reach out. Thank you so much.
Sure thing.
Thank you again, everybody, so much for coming and for joining us for this community night. And thank you for all of the people who presented and pitched. We really appreciated hearing from you. And Chris, do you want to jump in, or Scott, would you like to say anything before we close?
No, I think it was a great night and great presentations by all three of you guys. Thanks for, again, being willing to tell us about the good, the bad, and the ugly of this year. It's all part of the journey.
Yeah, very much appreciated or appreciative of you guys coming in and giving us an update. We did record it, and so we will make sure to figure out a way to post that to others in the community who weren't able to get here this evening. But again, thanks guys, really appreciate it.
See you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Can you pause the recording or stop the recording, Chris?
Yeah, maybe.